Sussex Squad, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here. So today I have something that's quite old, but I think is really, really telling to where the fight that the Sussexes has started to forge against systemic prejudice, including sexism. And Andrew Tate is a huge figure when it comes to that buzzword sexism and misogyny. And I just want to look at this with you. If you've seen it, take a look at it again with me, because I think this truly highlights that Piers Morgan is a psychopath. I mean, that psychopathy does not reason. It doesn't reason. It doesn't change its course of action. And I want to look at that right here, right now. And I think that Andrew Tate has the same thing going on. So let's look at it together.
Well, Andrew Tate joins me again now. Andrew, good to see you.
Salam alaikum, Piers.
Good to see you. I've genuinely been amazed by the reaction I've had in the streets. Not just here, but I went to Qatar for the World Cup, had the same thing there. A lot of people coming up about Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously, but also a lot of people coming up about you. And they were almost exclusively men, young men, who genuinely see you as a role model, as somebody who inspires them, as somebody they want.
Let's stop there. Here's already what's problematic. What we're dealing with is a mentality problem. It's a bigger problem than the figures that make up the issue. It's the players themselves. You know, the players themselves are contributing to a much bigger problem, and it trickles down to the most vulnerable people, which is the youngest, the ones who are dealing with issues at home, who might be dealing with issues with their mental health.
To be like.
Yep.
So that made me think, the first interview you had was quite combative. The second time, a shorter interview, less so. I want to try and work out in this one who you are, because it struck me as extraordinary that good...
I'm sorry, I have to stop again. I'm probably going to keep stopping. The other thing is I find it so ironic. I didn't see the interview that he had with Andrew Tate prior to this, 2 months prior to this. But looking at this, I can obviously imagine exactly what it was like. Maybe we'll review that one together too. You guys know I didn't come upon the Sussexes until late. So a lot of the stuff, it's old, but it's new for me. And I find that very ironic that right now Piers Morgan is trying to like mansplain a lecture to Andrew Tate when he in himself also possesses those attributes that a lot of people link with misogyny and with toxic masculinity. He never lets anyone speak. He's always speaking over people. He doesn't come from a place of emotional intelligence or compassion or empathy. He has been constantly going in for Meghan Markle, even though she has never, ever acknowledged him. So they don't pick up on social cues. They don't pick up on what's polite or even just, you know, kind from a common sense human's perspective. They don't really respect the voices and opinions of women, of transgender people. I did see that one interview with a transgender woman who happened to also be African. Well, not African American. She was British, but who also happened to be black. And she was just explaining her perspective to him of that experience of being from 2 marginalized groups. And he rejected everything that she was trying to say. He was just looking at it in this very, you know, what they tend to do, you know, what these extreme voices like Piers Morgan tend to do by, you know, just gaslighting you. Just, you know, if what you're saying doesn't match up with, like, I don't know, what's in the Oxford Dictionary and, you know, is in the World Encyclopedia, and it's just pure statistical data or fact, they can't wrap their head around it. The fact that that's just how you feel, they can't wrap their head around it. And beyond that, you can look at in the U.S. what's going on with the Republicans, how they're holding the debt ceiling, the question of what to do with the debt ceiling, how they're holding it hostage. You can see that even statistics, because I mean, almost every news network I've been looking at, you know, every article that I've read, and also just in my studying of politics itself, shows that generally in the U.S. under Democratic presidency, the budget is less. I mean, we're spending less. But under Republican rule, it's more spending. But right now, they're holding, the U.S. hostage, saying, we don't want any more spending, even though that we know that's exactly what they're going to go do. So there's that, oh, you were just being logical. We're just, exploring the data. But it's not really about that. It's always really back to power and control. On the individual level, for people like Piers Morgan, like Andrew Tate, I can have compassion. I look at these two men and I don't see evil human beings. I just see maybe two men who had either a rocky start off in life. Maybe they didn't get, as much of the love that they needed as children. Or perhaps they've faced other traumas within their lives that have really just put this icy cold wall up
Google
on their heart and their emotions and their feelings.
Some stats for the year. The number one person whose name followed people Google searching who is in 2022 was Andrew Tate.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable. I think there's a whole swath of the population, especially young men, that feel disenfranchised. They feel disenfranchised with the media machine and the things they're supposed to believe. They don't feel an affinity with the educational systems or the culture. And they look at a person like me who stands up and says the things that many young men think. I haven't put a magic spell on the world. The fact that people like what I say means that they agree with me deep inside. They may be afraid to say it themselves, but I am seen as a bastion of free speech and a bastion for masculinity as a whole, because a lot of men are largely forgotten about.
Do you think you're a force for good, or are you a force in evolution where perhaps you've done and said stuff you shouldn't have done, and as you get older, perhaps as you get bigger, more followed around the world, you sense a responsibility perhaps you didn't have early on?
Well, we all evolve. Every human evolves day by day. You wouldn't be human if you didn't evolve on an hour-by-hour basis. But I do not think I'm a force for good. I absolutely not really know I'm a force for good, because I'm a force for truth. And truth is a good thing. Without truth, we're going to...
I thought he was going to say, I absolutely know I'm not a force for good. I know that, I don't know, I thought after that something like, I know I'm controversial. I know I push buttons. He actually thinks that. That right there, again, a sign of psychopathy. Why have we let all of these psychopaths garner so much power and fame and money? What the...
And truth is a good thing. Without truth, we're going to end up in absolute tyranny and slavery, and we're already on our way there. I feel like we're starting to combat it. My cancellation was the beginning of a change in public consciousness. Elon having Twitter is another beginning of the change in public consciousness. And anybody who stands up and speaks what they truly believe, even if it's something I don't personally agree with, I think that truth is absolutely important. And people's personal truths and people's personal opinions, even on differing sides of the same opinion, should be heard.
Tell me about your life. You were born to a mixed race couple. Your father was an African American, a chess player.
Yeah.
And your mother, she was from this country.
Correct, yeah. So my father was black chess player. He was in the Air Force. He met my mother here in England. And then I was raised initially in the United States. And then I moved to Luton, England when I was younger. So I've moved around a lot. I've lived an eclectic life in many different scenarios. We've moved around. I've done a lot of different things, lived a lot of different experiences. And
what
I'm
nationality are you? I mean, what do you identify as?
I consider myself British now, but I will say that part of me, the patriotic Brit inside of me, is devastated by the state of the UK currently. And I want to make that very clear. The patriotic Brit in me truly loves this country. And seeing what's happening to it, especially to our major cities, is almost heartbreaking to watch in real time.
In what way?
It's falling apart. This is a failed society. By every metric you can possibly measure, it is absolutely and utterly failing. The cost of living crisis, the crime rates, everything is falling apart. If you compare it to a country like the United Arab Emirates, you compare it to a city like Dubai, London, which should be the greatest city on earth, is failing in absolutely every metric because our...
I mean, guys, quite seriously, I'm pretty sure that Joe Biden or Barack Obama or, Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams or who's another politician that I like. And he's not a politician, but he's dipping his toes into the political area. So I think he's probably prepared for a lot of criticism that way. But you got to have a little bit of decorum when you speak. You can't just say, oh, it's atrocious. The cities in the UK is terrible. What about the people? These are cities made of people. Do you actually care about the people? if you do, maybe you should talk about them.
Leadership is a joke. If you look at Dubai and the UAE, the leadership there is so flawless, so genuinely genius. They saw ahead and have built almost a utopia. And then you look at London, you can't even walk around with a watch on. It's disgusting.
You know, it's very interesting. I was in Qatar for the World Cup. Obviously, a lot of people in England taking a very censorious moral view about the World Cup being in the Middle East at all because of their laws against homosexuality, because of their treatment of migrant workers. I've got to say, not that I don't share the concerns about those things, of course I do, but I found a lot of the virtue signalling, and I think that's what it was in many cases, about the whole region actually quite distasteful. Because when I was in Qatar, I thought the World Cup was fantastically well run, incredibly good experience. But a lot of Qataris were saying to me, you know, there's this weird, quaint feeling back in your country that we all want to aspire to behave like that we all want to live in a country with massive drug problems, with massive knife crime issues, with scenes like the European Championships final where it's complete lawlessness going on, where stuff like the NHS, the system of healthcare, is basically collapsing, where the education system is dropping behind, so on and so on and so on. And it's a really interesting perspective. They were like, I know you all think that we want to have your form of democracy and your form of life, but actually, we're fine, thanks.
Absolutely, because it's a failed society and it's godless. I think it's disgusting. We leave our old people to rot in old people's homes, and then we sit there and say we don't have enough money for nurses. I understand this nurse strike very well and how frustrating it can be if you walk into a hospital and the nurse is not prepared to work. But the nurses would be prepared to work at the current...
See that the world is collapsing because of toxic masculinity? I'm just wondering, could that be a culprit?
Stuff like the NHS, the system of healthcare, is basically collapsing, where the education system is dropping behind, so on and so on and so on. And it's a really interesting perspective. They were like, I know you all think that we want to have your form of democracy and your form of life, but actually, we're fine, thanks.
Absolutely, because it's a failed society and it's godless. I think it's disgusting. We leave our old people to rot in old people's homes, and then we sit there and say we don't have enough money for nurses. I understand this nurse strike very well and how frustrating it can be if you walk into a hospital and the nurse is not prepared to work. But the nurses would be prepared to work at the current wage if they believed this country was spending its money prudently. When you see this country spending its money and just absolutely wasting it, pulling it out of thin air to fund proxy wars, God knows where, that has nothing to do with them. Of course, as a nurse, you're going to stand up and say, well, can't I get a pay rise? This country has failed on every metric. And especially our major cities. I've just come to London now. I made it very clear to my private jet pilot. I said, fuel the jet and leave it running, because the second I'm finished talking to Piers, I'm leaving this cesspit. It's disgusting. This country, and London as a whole, 10 years ago, was one of the most hospitable cities on earth. Now you cannot walk around safely with a watch on. And you're a full-grown man. You're a full-grown adult. When's the last time there's been a serious problem in your life that you completely ignored and it fixed itself? Never, ever.
Hold on. Let me just say this real quick. What he said about nurses, I'm with him on that. I think that nurses, teachers, many public service jobs like that need to be honored. But, yeah, the other stuff, I mean, how can he sit there and say he's patriotic, but everything he's saying is really disparaging Britain? I didn't hear anything positive in there. And beyond that, what's really ironic is he said you can, get robbed, get shanked, whatever, for wearing a watch while in London. I mean, something that he maybe hasn't fully considered is that perhaps many of these violent people, criminal people out there, performing acts like that, follow him on social media, like his posts, love his videos, because I'm not sensing any emotion. Even his face is very listless. At least with Piers Morgan, he smiles. The tone of his voice changes. There's intonation within the way that he speaks. I mean, he could be on the spectrum, Andrew Tate. Like my college boyfriend he had Asperger's. And I know that people with Asperger's can sometimes struggle to feel emotions in the same way that people who don't have Asperger's. I'm not saying that he has Asperger's, but I'm saying he seems extremely listless. Like extremely lethargic. And he's talking about very controversial stuff, and it doesn't seem like he's taking any of those like yellow lights, to like maybe sculpt how he's going to say it. And I mean, I think that exudes toxic masculinity. But we asked about his education. Okay. So like I said, he sounds like a very intelligent guy, but it looks like he only graduated from high school. So I think there's also another thing that's happening so much with young men, and it's very, very sad to watch, because in the U.S. at least, women are going to university in higher numbers than men today. You know, it's like, I think that this toxic masculinity and that we're seeing in pop culture has a problem with authority. It has a problem with emotional intelligence. And so it just lets it go. It's like, I got my high school degree, I got my GED, no offense to that. And, you know, I'm going to become a student of the world after that, because I don't want to deal with the confines of the educational system. So I'm just not going to go to university. And we see the fiscal results of that. I mean, it's just logical when you continue your education in higher numbers, your income is going to be better affected. You know, of course, there are little exceptions to that, but most people don't go on to only have a high school degree and become Andrew Tate. You know, I think that's very, very rare, and that he maybe needs to recognize that and be thankful for that. But I also think it points to this phenomenon where our young men are really stunting their inner growth as well as their intellectual growth. At face value, he sounds like a very, very, very smart person. But what university does have the unique ability to do is give you lots of perspectives from, yes, men from old dusty corners of history, you know, and women also, you know, not just men, but history. But also you get to surround yourself with other perspectives right here in the here and now. When you cut yourself off from that, you could just be kind of going around in this terrible loop, you know, of never ever discovering anything new, talking about the same thing.
What are any of our politicians doing to fix any of the problems we're genuinely facing?
Well, I saw today that Sadiq Khan is planning to run again for the third term of office as mayor. All I can say is everyone I know who's had any experience of crime at any level in London in the last few years has had a bad experience of the way it's been handled. You know, I mean, I can give an example. I can reveal this now. I've talked for 18 months. I got a specific death threat on one of my son's Instagram pages in public, a public comment. And it was very specific about what this person was going to do. Yeah. I couldn't use the police to evade him. We know where you live. We're going to come and kill you. And then a second one threatening my son and his mother, my ex-wife. I called in the police. I thought, I'm not having them putting death threats on my son's thing. Sure. I called the police. Police investigated this. They arrested somebody over a year ago. And then I heard from the police this week that despite 18 months of investigation, of a publicly posted comment on Instagram threatening to kill me on my son's Instagram, that they will not be able to pursue the case.
Now, like I can say as a human being, I don't ever want Piers Morgan or any of his family members to face death threats. Even as someone who finds Piers Morgan extremely problematic, and I can say he's probably one of my least favorite television personalities, entertainers, I don't want him having death threats. And that if he told me that story, that would be the first place that I would come from. I'd be like, oh my God, are you okay? Is your son okay? Like, I'm glad that you were able to pursue some legal routes to ensure your family's safety. I don't even have to listen to Andrew Tate to see that he didn't come from a place of emotional intelligence, because his first thing that he says isn't something to that effect. I mean, even when Piers Morgan is talking, you know, he's just like completely upright, you know, and he's, you know, like, he's not looking at Piers Morgan in the eyes. He's not nodding his head. There's no signs that affected him emotionally in any way, you know. And I don't even like Piers Morgan, and that affects me emotionally because I don't want anybody to face any kind of harm. I think as human beings, that's pretty much the place. So to me, that just points to some sadistic type of. You know what? I'm just thinking now. I'm like, dude, this was on purpose. I feel like Piers Morgan was like, let me get Andrew Tate on here. That way I can get somebody who's at least a little bit, you know, a little bit more sadistic than I am.
Look, imagine, I'm high profile. This was a front page of the Sun newspaper, this
If
story.
that same man called a transgender person the wrong pronouns, he would be in trouble.
Right.
So doesn't it just show how
Where did that come from? The hypothetical comparison of some invisible, imaginary transgender man, somebody would be in legal trouble if you called someone the wrong pronoun? I haven't heard of that yet. Like, maybe I missed something, but where was a lawsuit or and what way is that comparable on any level to someone receiving a death threat? Or even the comparison that he gave earlier of, like, if you have on a watch in London and you're getting shanked by a criminal. Those are not, yeah, like I said.
asinine and banal our legal system has become. That would never happen in a country like United Arab Emirates, the place I'm now residing in, Dubai, where the leadership has common sense. And I'm saying that all the leadership structures, doesn't matter if it's Labour or Conservative, across all of it in this nation have completely and utterly failed.
I think people like Andrew Tate want to live in a society that is very black and white. You know, I think they want to live in a society that is very militant, you know, and just, it has strict rules, and they think, oh, but me as the man, the patriarchy, the chosen group, you know, I'm going to have these amazing benefits. But if that were to actually happen, they wouldn't have all the same benefits that they're able to enjoy. And then they would be begging to go back to what they came from. So, like I said, I feel like Andrew Tate, I feel like he should have gone to university. I feel like after he graduated high school, if he did graduate high school, he probably had a route ahead of him. And maybe his stubbornness just didn't let him go that route. But guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think it would have made a difference? I just feel like if Andrew Tate would have, I'm not saying university is just going to be some amazing transformative thing that just is like fairy dust magic, but you guys get what I'm saying, right? Like, not necessarily just university, but if he would have gone to university, if he would have, like, continued down a passion other than, I don't know what his passion is. It seems like it's just working out and saying kind of sexist stuff. So, like, if he would have discovered something else, like if he said he really liked Britain. So maybe it could have been like, you know, colonial and you know, Baroque Britain. Maybe his studies could have been 17th century Britain. Maybe his studies could have been like war. He seems like he likes war. Maybe he could have studied the history of war. Like, maybe he could have studied, I don't know, but I just feel like what I'm looking at here is a stunted man, a man who's been stunted in his emotional and intellectual growth, and I don't see emotional intelligence here. Like, I mean, literally during that death threat thing, he didn't blink. I mean, he didn't crouch in, move in a little bit and say, wow, I'm sorry to hear about that. He, like, it's a little weird. It's a little weird, you know? Like, it's pointing to some personality disorder type stuff for me.
Sadiq Khan is a loser, because when you have a city which is losing, which London is losing in all metrics across its competitive cities around the world, and you're in charge of it, by extension, you're a loser. I will tell you right now, instead of virtue signaling and giving Qatar a hard time over their religious beliefs, what we should be doing is a treaty with Qatar to build a prison deep in the desert. Make me mayor of London. We'll make a prison deep in the desert, and if you're caught with a knife or robbing someone, you can go do 25 years with one meal a day in the scorching sun. And then what we'll do is we'll put cameras there and we'll interview you once a week and broadcast that out to the nation and see if you change your mind and make people understand that this is a country that should be respected and our laws should be respected. Instead, what happens? What has Sadiq or any of the people in charge of this country actually done to fix any of our issues besides sit around and talk? Nothing. None of them have done anything, but they seem ultra concerned with finding money for proxy wars, ultra concerned with rainbow flags in another country that is uninterested in them, and their priorities are completely messed up. Of course, the ambulance people.
This is dangerous. This is so dangerous. This type of mentality this man is just crapping onto the world. And what's so scary is that he doesn't know it's dangerous. He doesn't know. And I don't think that he truly thinks that he's right and justified in his behavior. I think that something clicked off probably quite a long time ago. I don't know what trauma he faced. I don't know what it is, but I'm a good reader of this. I go with my gut. We're not speaking to Andrew Tate, who was born into this world. We're speaking to a different Andrew Tate who probably went through some shit, and it's manifested itself as someone who is extremely aggressive, extremely one-sided thinking, not open-minded, and a little bit militant, and it's quite alarming. Hyper-masculine. It's quite alarming.
People are. Of course the ambulance drivers are striking. Of course the nurses are striking. Nobody cares about the most important things in this nation. It's a failing country in real time, and that's why I've left.
What about the specific allegation? By the way, I don't disagree with a lot of that because I do think this country is in big trouble. And I do think that one of the problems is people think if they do have a crime against them, nobody cares anymore.
I know nobody cares. I have specific examples and people who I know personally. Absolutely and utterly nobody cares. I was in Harrods yesterday and someone tried to rob someone's watch in the middle of the store. I walk around with I have a security team of 6 full-grown men, plus me and my brother, 8 military-age males, all over 110 kilos, big men, just so I can walk around this city. It's absolutely unacceptable.
What about the issue of race? And I mentioned that in the context of the Harry and Meghan ongoing debate, their war with the royal family, war against the monarchy, their specific, constant referencing to the fact that they believe they were driven out of here because...
Before I even listen to whatever this trash discussion between these two very, very problematic figures about Harry and Meghan, you guys know that the successes have my full support, and I will keep raging for them, raging for us to live in a more tolerant, more multicultural world, a more diverse one that comes from a place of peace, one that wants to honor people's well-being. I mean, Andrew Tate seems, like I said, very lethargic. He hasn't smiled once during this interview. He doesn't seem like he experiences the natural ups and downs and flows of what's basic human emotion. It just kind of seems plateaued, right? And when you get to that place, it's quite alarming. It's quite alarming. And what Harry and Meghan are doing, I see them giving something of such value to the world. They're speaking up about race, about systemic prejudice, like racism, like sexism, like xenophobia. They're bringing awareness on climate change. Climate change. I mean, quite literally, we are on the brink of catastrophe concerning climate change. And many conservative figures, far-right extremist figures, want to pretend that it's not happening. Well, when they can't walk around in Harrods because it's so friggin' hot, when that's no longer a possibility, then they might be thinking, maybe we should have done something when we thought back. I see so much contribution from Harry and Meghan that comes from a natural human place. A human place that wants to have connection between human beings from an emotional place. The cries of joy and laughter, the experiences of hope and healing and faith and love and brotherhood and sisterhood. Maybe Andrew Tate's following has the brotherhood part down, but can you really say that's what it is when they connect over things like being extremely one-sided viewing on politics, not very progressive, extremely far-right mentality that's destructive in nature towards marginalized groups, in ways that are not honoring the empathy that human beings need to have, the compassion, especially public figures, when you are, for lack of a better terms, a voice for many different people. When you can't even come from that place of compassion, that is really, really, really concerning. And so I feel like Harry and Meghan as far as having the UK be a place that is progressed and better in these terms of the way that it makes those people, those black and brown people in Britain feel, to make them feel integrated and considered, to consider the safety of their physical body and their mental body and their spiritual body. That's good work to me. But I know that these two are about to slam it down. So let's watch it together in real time and see it.
Of racism in Britain. What do you make of that debate?
That's absolute fallacy.
And you're from a mixed race
Correct.
background yourself.
Correct. I'm from a mixed race background myself, and while we're discussing the leaders of the UK, although I do think they're doing a terrible job, it's kind of hard for Meghan to say that the UK is a racist country when the leader of the UK is darker skinned than her. And
let me pause that. Just because the UK put a plant in there, you know, a brown face of white supremacy, you know, and still across the board, the representation in the UK, in the administration, in the government, in the public sectors, in the entertainment sector, in all the sectors across the board in the UK, if they are not reflective of the actual diversity in the country, don't sit here and talk about Rishi Sunak. Don't sit here. And Rishi Sunak is more conservative than probably King Charles himself. So I'm not completely buying it. You know what? That's not a good reference because Charles, let's say more conservative than Nigel Farage himself. Maybe that's a better reference. The other thing is I find it so bizarre that he continuously says the leadership in the UK is atrocious, but he doesn't provide us with information for the reasonings behind that. He did speak a little bit on the nursing industry earlier. He did speak on crime, but what exactly is it that the leaderships have failed on in his part, and what in terms of policy and parliament, and what do they need to do to remedy it? Like, again, I think that's where you get when you get a bunch of emotionally and intellectually stunted men. They know what they want to say. I mean, I can't say that I respect Andrew Tate, but I respect that he's a human being and he is entitled to live his experience, you know, live through his experience and come to his own conclusions, but, you know, really be able to verbalize what it is that you want to say. And I'm not getting that. I really am not. And to shine the light back on Meghan Markle, I think is kind of really unfair.
Mayor of London is darker skinned than her, and I am a person who's probably darker skinned than her, and I've never experienced any kind of bigotry against myself besides the fact I'm a straight male. I'll get bigotry for that before I'll get bigotry for my skin color. I think it's just a call.
So this is pointing to some narcissism because we weren't talking about you. We were talking about Meghan Markle.
About and her not wanting to be perspicacious and self-reflective enough to understand that she has attacked an age-old institution, and there are people who are very patriotic about that institution, and by attacking it and bringing a degree of distaste to it, there's going to be people who don't like her. And if you're a dislikable person, you...
Let me just remind Mr. Tate that there was... Meghan's just one person, and her husband Harry also attested to the experience that she had. So did some other people as well within the firm. But... you know, there also was someone who attacked an age-old system, and it's called the United States of America. So would you say that the whole entirety of the United States of America was not progress?
Can't just instantly stand up and say it's because of my skin color. It might be because of your actions and some of the things you've said.
I mean, I think there's probably no doubt she's had racism on social media because it's...
Who hasn't, Piers?
It's a cesspage.
You probably have.
Well, as I said just now, I've had death threats on social media and no one seemed to care very much.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably inarguable.
And polarizing figures like that contribute to the toxic culture of social media.
My issue with what they've both been doing is if you're going to make allegations against an institution like the royal family and the monarchy, you've got to actually provide some evidence. You can't just spray gun this thing out there and say, well, somebody was racist.
So
yeah,
you've got to provide some evidence. So if you're going to sit here and say that I abused you and the institution that I support abused you, you need to provide me with some evidence that I deem appropriate. That's what he should have put at the end of the evidence part. Evidence that I deem appropriate.
Yeah, and airing dirty laundry is never going to be respected by the populace. And being a tattletale is never going to be respected by the populace. And I think the problem with the modern world we're living in is a lot of age-old traditions are being destroyed in real time. It doesn't matter what the tradition is. Most of them are being eroded. And something like the British royal family, which has been around for a very long time, is an age-old tradition. One of the things holding the UK together, one of the last things we have, to sit and detriment it and to sit and insult it and to give away secrets from inside of it and try and paint a negative image of it is going to upset a lot of people. And you have to be prepared for that backlash. You can't say, I've done things that upset people, but it's...
You know what an age-old tradition is? Religion. And I'm Catholic. I pray pretty much daily that the Lord will just show people, look, you have the opportunity to love. You have the opportunity to extend the compassion that you would want to for yourself onto others. You have the opportunity for when somebody is kicking someone when they're down, you have the opportunity to give them a hand up. Everything that I'm seeing in here is just, it says this is the enemy. This is the enemy right here. And what is so scary about the enemy is that he will make you believe that you are so righteous. He will make you believe that you are so righteous in your areas where you're being problematic, you know. So religion is an institution, and at least in the Abrahamic religions, when someone says, hey, I suffered a hurt, I suffered a loss, and many people are suffering, can you help us? Usually in those faith traditions, Jesus, Muhammad, Yahweh would call you to help that person. So the fact that he is just putting down Meghan Markle and, you know, playing altar boy for the British monarchy is very, very expected for me. And it's very expected for Piers Morgan. So I came into this knowing exactly what I was going to see. But, you know, I think that it's very problematic that I am that way and that we are that way. That we're no longer surprised when people say incredibly hurtful things.
Nothing to do with what I've done. It's purely because of my skin color. Also, it's kind of ironic that she's doing that because she's not particularly dark-skinned. It's kind of funny to sit here. I mean, look, watch her sit and say, race.
I think the truth is, I don't know what... Look, you can say that. I can't. The reality of it is, I just don't know what the specifics of the racism she says she's had because we've not seen any evidence.
The universe is a funny place, Piers. If you're looking for something, you're going to find it, right? When I got canceled, when they attacked me unfairly, lied about me across the entire mainstream media, deleted me from social media so I couldn't defend myself, and lied about me repeatedly, I could have stood up and said, it's because I'm brown. I didn't do that. I sat and said, okay, there's people who misunderstand my message. My message is a positive one. People misunderstand me. Let me self-reflect and understand that, yes, perhaps this said a long time ago was said in the wrong way. Perhaps this was misunderstood. Perhaps people don't understand this. I could have just copped out and could have just been refusing to self-reflect on any level and said, it's because I'm brown, that's why they did it. But that's not the mature way to be as an adult.
What did you think of the Jeremy Clarkson furore where he wrote what I think most people, but including him belatedly after he'd published it and written the column, he did make an analogy from a Game of Thrones scene, which most people, I think, did find crossed a line and was deeply offensive. I think it crossed a line. What do you think?
Yeah, I understand why people feel that. But when you attack an institution as old as the British royal family, you're attacking patriotism in and of itself for one of the most respected countries, or previously most respected countries on earth, and you're going to have some visceral reactions. Perhaps Jeremy Clarkson is too famous and too well-renowned to say those kind of things, but there's a lot of people who genuinely feel that way, and that's why he said it. And this is what happens when you attack age-old institutions in any country.
Should he have apologized?
That's a good question. It looks like he did. Personally, I think as a man, you should stand up, say what you mean what you say. I don't think you should ever apologize for anything you've ever said. Even me.
What if you say something truly very offensive and you actually do regret it?
If you truly regret it, then yeah, okay, you can apologize. But if at the time you meant it, then the best thing you can do is say, look, I have just changed my mind. I no longer feel that way. But at the time, that's how I felt. And I'm the person who says what he feels. And that's what I felt at the time. And I apologize that offended you.
Look, that's got toxic masculinity written all over it. But honestly, guys, I would love to know what you think. Please let me know in the comments, and if you're new to this channel, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, hit the bell so you know whenever I post a video, and I'll see you next time. Okay.